Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legend of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we will be talking about some of my old predictions that I made for the newest set that came out Beyond the Bandlewood. And we will be talking about the cards that I got most wrong, and the cards that I actually got right. And I think it's quite interesting to see and sort of go back and think about how, these cards can perform better. What actually turns out to actually be good when we see it in the actual game versus our sort of ideas and predictions for those cards. Now, if you did go back and watch every single, video clip of me, talking about the cards when they first came out, you'll see, obviously the fair share of right and wrong predictions, of course. Some are right and some are wrong. Some are wrong because I misread a card, like Stress Defense, I said was a really bad card because I thought it could only target your opponent's units, but then later clarified, oh, this card actually isn't that bad, because I found out later on, that it can actually target your own units as well, and it's turned out to be a pretty fine card. But let's talk about the cards that I got right and wrong, and why I got them right or wrong. So let's start with some cards that I got right, and we begin with Poppy. Now, I don't think I was the only one saying that Poppy would be good. I think most people expected Poppy or saw Poppy and thought she's going to be decent. From what I remember when she was, revealed, I remember a lot of people saying, oh, she's never going to level up, and so they thought, she wouldn't be crazy good because they thought, oh, she'll never level up. However, this is probably the one that maybe I got the most right, because I said when I first saw Poppy, this will be a top 10, top 5 champion in the game when she comes out. Which is a pretty bold prediction, to call something like top 5 champion before you've ever played with the card. And Poppy was revealed pretty early in the set, so I didn't even know, they could have just come out with 5 champions that were better right after as well. They didn't. And Poppy, I knew was going to be good because she has, as I was saying at the time, all the hallmarks of a good champion. Anyway, you look at some of the best champions in the game, it tends to be that their level 1 condition is just, really good on its own. You think of Draven, you think of Sivir, and that their level 2 is like a nice bonus that can just really win the game. I think Sivir is a really good comparison for like a 4-mana champion. The level 1 is insane, the level 2 just makes sure that you win the game, right? That's kind of where I was going with that. And funnily enough, in Reddit's rating of the champions, Poppy came in the top 5. So that's pretty good prediction, if I do say so myself. But I think Poppy probably was one that we were all pretty high on, so it's probably not the one that I'm most proud of. But I think calling it a top 5 champion and it ended up being a top 5 champion is a pretty good, bold prediction. Okay, on to Station Archivist, and this is a really interesting one because I was actually lower on this card than a lot of other people were. I said that this card is like, a 6, 6.5 out of 10, that in the right deck can become like a 7.5, 8 out of 10. And I think, upon first reaction, people would have gone, what are you talking about? This card's insane, this card's crazy. I remember a lot of hype for this card. And a lot of people thinking that this card was going to be just an absolute staple in like every single Piltover and Zorn deck. And as it's turned out, pretty much I was kind of right. This is kind of maybe just slightly below playable in a lot of decks, and, can fit certain decks, is good in certain decks, like Go Hard, is a synergy that I talked about at the time. And that's where I think Station Archivist is probably best. And so I kind of like these ones where, I'm kind of like a bit edgy with my choice. I'm going a bit out of left field. I'm kind of, a bit different on what other people or what a lot of other people are saying about a card. And I think this is a card that a lot of people were very high on, but probably has, underwhelmed quite a bit. You probably haven't seen this card nearly as much as we probably thought we would. But yeah, this was a good one. A good spot. Okay, now on to Nami, and interestingly for Nami, what I did not predict was that Nami was going to be, like, an insane champion that needed a nerf. What I did say, I think, was that Nami was a, 7 out of 10 champion. And, if the right deck comes along, then she could become insane. Now, that isn't, of itself, a great prediction, I grant you, because pretty much any combo champion like Nami or like a Lee Sin, you know, any of these kind of champions that like have a very combo snowbally element to them, that's kind of true for all of them. You know, if the right deck comes along where they can really support them, yeah, they become insane because they snowball very fast and can win you the game very fast. So that in itself wasn't a great prediction, but combined with the fact, and this is I think is what I'm most proud of with Nami, is that I was very, very early to the fact that Nami had to be played with Zoe in Targon. And, you know, I didn't necessarily get every card prediction right. You know, I was in my like initial builds, I was running like Mentor of the Stones and stuff, right? But I knew that Nami was not meant to go with Fizz. That Nami Zoe made so much more sense. And I feel pretty proud about that because, you know, it's felt like people were sticking with Nami Fizz for a very long time. And my argument was always, how are you ever going to beat an aggro deck? You know, at least I have Sparklefly with Targon. And guess what? That has been the main sort of combo that has been used in these Nami Zoe decks, is getting a Sparklefly out, using Nami to buff that Sparklefly, and you can, guess what? You can beat aggro if you have like a 10 attack lifesteal unit. So this one I was pretty proud of, not necessarily for like how strong I thought the card was, but just recognizing that what the correct deck was for Nami and the correct regions that you had to be playing. Next up is Mirai Warden, and this card really is only on here because I saw a post on Runeterra.ccg that also does card ratings that gave this card a 1 out of 5, and that just stuck with me, and it has stuck with me ever since, because I think pretty much everyone else, you know, probably had a similar reaction to Mirai Warden, and that it's probably going to be a pretty solid card. This one really is just to point out how insane it was that someone thought that this card was a 1 out of 5. Because this card has like the most easy comparison like of any card, because we already have cards like this. You know, we have House Spider, we have Fading Icon, we have 2-mana cards that give you another follower in hand, and we know that they are good. We already know that. They see play all the time. You know? So how was this card ever not going to be good? And, you know, having a 2-mana 2-1 and getting a random 1-cost follower was almost always, you know, going to be probably like a slightly better House Spider. It was always going to be close. Sometimes you could low roll, sometimes you could really high roll, you know, and I haven't really, you know, gone into all the 1-drops and seen like how many would I say is better than House Spider. I assume it's probably pretty close. But anyway, a build drawer having like a House Spider is just really good, because House Spider, guess what, is a good card. Mirai Warden is also a good card. And so, yeah, this one, I mean, I got it right. A lot of other people got it right. But, you know, it just goes to show that, you know, some people, even like experienced players, can get even some basic cards, you know, horribly wrong. And I am definitely still in that camp as well. Don't get me wrong, as we'll see later on. But yeah, Mirai Warden, just a solid card, and I think has, you know, performed pretty well. And last but not least, we come to Wastewalker, and this one's really interesting because I kind of got sucked in, and I should have just stuck to my guns. And I know I should have just stuck to my guns, and I really should just not listen to anyone else when doing these, because I got sucked in by Wastewalker. I got convinced by other people that this card was going to be, you know, insane. But my initial reaction to this card was, this card is a 6.5. I'm not sure it fits the speed of these landmark decks perfectly. I'm not sure that you would play in those decks. But other people, a lot of other people, were saying, this card's insane. This is a 3-mana 6/6 overwhelm. What an insane card. And I got convinced. I got sucked in, and it's happened to me before as well. It happened with Jarvan back in the day. You know, when Jarvan was first released, I was so down on Jarvan, and I actually made a video where the file ended up being corrupted, and I had to do a later recording, and then, you know, people were so high on Jarvan, they convinced me to be like a bit higher on it, and I went against my own gut, and I was right, because Jarvan needed 2 buffs to even just be okay. And that annoys me. And Wastewalker is kind of the same, because my initial reaction was so right. This card doesn't quite fit the speed. It doesn't quite work well enough, and it's been cut from a lot of different landmark decks, despite seeing a lot of play early on. Like, drawing the second one just felt awful. Like, this was a card that you could only play on turn 3. If you didn't have it on turn 3, it just felt so bad. And it was like, initially I recognized it, but then people, they sucked me in. But anyway, going back to my initial prediction, I was very right about this card, and even though a lot of people were very high on this card, I sort of, my initial reaction was very correct and put it, I think, pretty perfectly where it is. A 6.5 it's not a terrible card. You could play this card and it'll be, pretty good in some matches. But, you'll probably have better options, and especially because I was also right about another 3-mana card that, of course, goes into all of those decks, which, if I can find, Endless Devout. Endless Devout, I've said, like, oh, this is your 8.5 card in landmark decks that will definitely be in all of them. And that proved to be true as well. Okay, on to the 5 worst, and we start with Loping Telescope, and initially I gave this a 6 out of 10, which isn't probably the worst. Like, I'm saying that the card is okay, I didn't say this card was bad, but this card ended up surprising, I think, a lot of people, and turned out to be a really, really good card. Now, part of that is because it can re-get itself, which, obviously, I don't think any of us could have predicted, because not many other things can get themselves in those kind of things. So, we didn't necessarily know that, and that does add to the strength of this card, but obviously the card is strong nevertheless. And, probably what I was missing, and I think this is where, this gets quite interesting, is what did we miss about certain cards, right? And I think with Loping Telescope, what I perhaps missed was, the unpredictability of options that you could get from it. A Celestial that costs 3 or less is pretty good anyway. Right? They're all pretty good. Anyway, the epic card could be something useless, but we never think about the times when I first read this, it was like an epic. I was thinking you'll never choose the epic. Now, most of the times you don't, but sometimes you get an epic card that wins you the game, like literally wins you the game. You can get, literally anything. You could get a Ruination, and your opponent can't play around it. That's the beauty of this card, is that sometimes that epic will just win you the game straight up on the spot, and your opponent can't play around it. And that's what, is a big part that makes this card so good. And the multi-region followers, it turns out, were probably a bit better than we all expected, just as a collective group. They aren't that bad. And so basically, you were always going to get at least one of the 3 that was probably a pretty good option. And that's probably what I missed with this card, is that, we probably... And I think other people probably did as well. I think a lot of people end up thinking that this is an okay card. Like, it's, it's a main deckable card. You can put it in a deck. But didn't think it would be, like, really good. And I think this card has turned out to be really good. And sees play in a lot of different decks for, good reason. It's just a really good card. Moving on to what was perhaps not just mine, but I think this was by far the most underrated card in the entire reveal season by a million miles. I think I gave this card like a 4 out of 10. And, well, one reason was I actually missed that when you actually play this as an 8-mana card, you also get a Twin Blade Revenant. I actually missed that. I didn't know that at first, because I remember the first time I played against this card and someone played the 8-mana version of it, I was like, why did they get one? And it wasn't until then that I realized that it actually does both. So I perhaps misread the card at first as well, but that did not excuse, even if you would have told me that, I still would not have thought this card was that good. But this card is insane. This card is like nerf-worthy, straight away good. Like first balance patch that they do, they should nerf this, like straight up. How you nerf it is quite interesting, but this card gives you so much value, it's almost impossible to overcome, right? And I don't think we maybe could have predicted how that deck would come together. And I think we were all in the mindset of like Scion and how do I make Scion good. But I think, as we've kind of gone on, Lost Soul, whilst good in Scion decks, it's even better in like, the kind of Draven Caitlyn or, Draven Ezreal, whatever it is, it's even better in that deck, right? And it performs just insane in that deck. And so Lost Soul is just a card that we were all very wrong on, just the constant barrage of Twin Blade Revenants. And how you fix this card is very interesting, because I genuinely think you might need to just scrap Challenger from this card. And that's how good it is, right? And that is like taking a keyword off something. Have they even ever done that before to a card? I'm not sure they have. Maybe they have once or twice. But not that I can think of off the top of my head. But, like, that's the level of nerf I think this card needs, because it just provides you with so much value. Like, so much value. That it, like, as the game goes longer, you're almost like guaranteed to win because these things will just kill your opponent. Like they will just pick off everything they've got and just slowly whittle you down, and you can barely do anything about it. You know, you have to have very specific things to do to try and get rid of this card. It's just so frustrating to play against and be like, I can't even kill this. Killing it doesn't even work. So yeah, Lost Soul, probably the card that we all got most wrong, because I don't think many people were talking about this card at all, and I know that people were very reluctant to put it in at first because they were non-believers like myself, but then, wow, yeah, this card shocked us all, I think. Speaking of cards we all got wrong, Kelp Maidens. I know that I was definitely not alone when I saw this card and thought that this is going to be a really, really good card. Now, let's be fair. It's not that this card is really bad. This card is not really bad. I think what actually happened was there just was more 1 damage pings than we could have expected. Between Vile Feast and like Twisted Fate and Make It, you know, the buffed Make It Rain, perhaps we were still thinking in the old days, right? But between all of those and then, you know, Pokestick was the last card to be revealed, and that really probably did push that over the edge, you know, that it just became like 1 damage. Anything with 1 health for 2 mana, you know, that needed like to strike in any way, probably got a lot worse as soon as Pokestick was revealed. And this card was revealed before Pokestick, so maybe we can cut ourselves a bit of slack there. But I know that I was not alone in like giving this card an 8 out of 10, thinking that this card would be an absolute meta staple, that you'd see this card a lot. And I'm not sure I've seen anyone play it, even once. So, you know, that just goes to show, I guess, you know, how crazy this is. And I guess that this was meant to work, right, with like the Fizz Nami deck. And as I've said, like, Nami is better with Zoe, so that kind of never came along. So maybe this card is also somewhat without a home. But even so, I just can't help but think, wow, how wrong we all were about Kelp Maidens. Now, this one is pretty embarrassing for myself because I've probably played this card more than any other card. Certainly this deck more than any other deck since the expansion released. And that is, I believed, truthfully, I did believe, that Kalina Mastermind was a worse card than Ava Achiever. Now, we all know that that is not true anymore. And I don't honestly know what I was thinking. I think what probably happened here is that it was difficult for me to sort of understand and predict how often Kalina would just deal like 12 to your opponent. I think that that's probably what happened, is that I was thinking it would probably end up being like an average damage of about 4 or 5, something like that. When in reality, oftentimes in these mushroom decks, you're getting anywhere from like 8 to 15. Had I known that, I obviously would have not had Kalina this low. I think I gave Kalina like a 6. So it wasn't like I was saying Kalina was terrible, but I did not realize just how crazy Kalina actually was as a finisher. And, you know, I just thought that the inevitability of Ava would be, you know, just a more reliable win condition than this sort of, you know, Kalina style. But I think perhaps what I also thought was that, you know, we were going to end up in the full trap deck where perhaps Ava does do better. Not necessarily a better card than Kalina still, but, you know, perhaps that does fit Ava more. But in my experimentation, you know, I realized that Caitlyn is definitely not the way to go when it comes to Teemo. You're better off just going all in mushrooms and trying to go for the win on turns 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there where Kalina can just end the game for you on the spot. And so, yeah, I was very wrong about Kalina. Kalina's very good. And then finally, the last card that I was potentially very wrong about was Ambush. I was very scared about this card. And, you know, this is an interesting one because Ambush, I still believe this card could be really good one day. You know, in the right sort of combo deck, I still do think it's possible this card could be, you know, really strong and really quite toxic to play against. It has all the makings of toxic cards to play against. You know, burst speed, giving something elusive an extra attack. You know, those are all the kind of things that like sound toxic. And I think that's what scared me initially. And, you know, this card obviously has not lived up to expectations. I was saying that this card, you know, could be, you know, I never like gave this a solid rating, but I was like, it could be a 9. It could, you know, be completely broken. Maybe one day this will get nerfed. I was speaking in those terms about this card because essentially it kind of is in that same space of if the right combo comes along. It's kind of like where Nami is now, right? Where if the right combo comes along, this card will be broken, you know, because it, as I say, it has a lot of toxic elements to it that won't be fun to play against at all. I think the only thing that is stopping this card right now is perhaps the fact that it's in Piltover and Zorn, where there isn't, you know, as outside of Vi, there isn't like an easy way of doing that. You know, if this was in a more unit-centric, you know, region, then I think that, you know, this would cause problem. If this was in Freljord, if this was in Demacia, I mean, obviously it would somewhat break what they do normally, so of course that would be pretty strong. But, you know, if it was in one of those more unit-driven regions, then I think it would be very problematic indeed. And so it's still possible in the future, you know, if we get like a Piltover and Zorn champion that becomes, you know, more combat-focused, I guess, that this card could be a bit of a problem still. But for now, obviously, it kind of sits away, just lurking in the shadows. But that was it for this one. Those were the 5 cards that I got the most right, got the most wrong. I'd love to hear what cards, you know, you were really high on and maybe got right or wrong, and what cards, you know, you were really low on and were surprised by. Because I think it is very good to go back and sort of see, like, why did I get this wrong? You know, why did I get this right even? And think about, you know, that for your future card evaluations, so that you can know the next time on day 1 you can just go out and dominate, because you have all the correct, you know, decisions on all of the cards. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. I've been Chris. Have a really nice day.